All right. We'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Nyla Frye.
Here.
Trisha Brown.
Here.
Sam Kaufmann.
Here.
Kristen Runge.
Here.
Aaron Moran.
Here.
Joe Zitzelsberger.
Here.
And Robert McPherson.
Here.
And next up is confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 11/17. The final agenda was posted in all three official posting locations on 11/15 and 11/17. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on 11/16. Just two notes for the audience. Please be sure you sign in with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping. And those interested in participating in the public comment or public hearing portion of the agenda should fill out the correct form and hand it to me prior to that agenda item.
All right. Thank you. Next up is public comment. Public comment is 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here in person that would like to make a public comment?
I do not have any forms.
All right. Do we have anyone online?
We do have one individual online. If you do, raise hand. Perfect. I'm going to bring you in. Isaac, you should be able to present now.
Hello. I'm Isaac Dranksfit. I live at 1510 Centennial Parkway in Waunakee. I'm a senior at the high school and president of the environmentally compassionate organization. I presented at the last meeting about how Waunakee can address environmental concerns. I'd like to start by thanking you all. It is exciting to see that the board is considering sustainability. Secondly, I would like to stress the importance of the environment to students in Waunakee. At a youth climate conference last week, Waunakee registered the most students out of 30 schools from Dane County in the state, out of about 130 students. We are anxious about climate change and its impacts on us now and in the future. It is crucial to keep youth involved in the process of sustainability at the local government level, to provide insight and incorporate individuals who will be the most affected by the village's decisions. Looking at the memo by President Runge in this meeting's packet, myself, my peers, and community members were encouraged to reiterate some points. We would be excited to see a 90-day sprint with specific goals to curb Waunakee's greenhouse gas or GHG emissions and mitigate climate change. According to Cool Climate Data, which is a study done by the University of California, Berkeley, Waunakee households emit 60 metric tons of CO2 equivalents annually compared to 66 in Cottage Grove, which is the highest in Dane County, and just 53 metric tons in total in Middleton. We have an immense opportunity to save money as a community by lowering these emissions as a government, as homeowners, and as business owners through energy efficiency and health concerns and quality of life, those things. And a sprint solely planned for baseline research is redundant to other studies. The Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, or WICI, has consolidated the risks of climate change on our communities with scientific data from several studies. Waunakee can follow in the footsteps of many other nearby communities in our policy making without having to enact in-depth research, which we have already done with this research done this year already. Plans exist and can be modified to our specifications. Above all, I must highlight the need to act now. Inflation Reduction Act monetary benefits are still available, but on a first come, first served basis. A range of sustainable actions can cost 30% less through this funding, and if we wait months longer, we may miss out on this opportunity and also fall farther behind other communities. Postponing action can also cause us to miss the chance to integrate sustainability into current and future plans. So thank you for your consideration and action.
All right. And those are anyone else for public comments? Just Isaac. All right. Thank you very much, Isaac, for chiming in tonight. We appreciate it and always appreciate input from the public. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they would like pulled?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda approved. Next up is reports, and first item on the agenda is Community Development Authority. Tricia?
At the Community Development Authority last Wednesday, we held a public hearing in regards to the consideration of establishing the boundaries and approving the project plan for the tax increment finance district number 10. And the committee did pass the resolution to the village board recommending the approval and the establishment.
Thank you. And next up is Plan Commission, and I'll give the Plan Commission report. We had a pretty busy agenda last week. We reviewed softball lighting for the girls varsity softball team at the high school. We looked over the middle school site plan as presented by the school district and their architects. There was a lot of discussion around that revolving around parking, around capacity, around the energy capacity of the building, green features of the building. We discussed the concept plan for an apartment development at Woodland Crest that is just in the concept stage for 125 unit apartment complex. We reviewed and discussed the potential chicken ordinance, and that should be coming back again. And we approved a new set of parking requirements that is the end of, or the result of months, if not years of work, and are going to provide a lot of clarity. And Tim put a lot of work into that, and Robert put a lot of work into that. So it was a very busy meeting, and we have a couple of items that you'll see tonight that'll come up. Next up, Joint Plan Commission, and I believe that's you, Tim.
Let's see, the Joint Plan Commission did meet. They hadn't met for several months. They met last week. One of the items is actually we'll be discussing here this evening.
Excellent. Waunakee met last Thursday. We went over fundraising, and we're fundraising for the July 4th event is well underway. We reviewed bands and entertainment, particularly for the children's areas. And so that is coming along speedily, given that it's 9 months down the road. Library Board, that'd be you, Aaron?
That's me. We met on Friday, October. There were 4 new records at the library. I forget the ebooks, story time, and then to the meeting rooms and the study rooms. So exciting as always. And it's Dino-vember. So the librarian staff, postal dinosaurs all over the library doing cool, cute things. So go check it out online and in person.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Aaron. And then we have any other committees, boards, or commissions that are not listed? And Robert?
EMS.
Thank you.
EMS met, we continued our discussion on revising the agreement. So the next 2 items that we'll be addressing are elections of the basically of the who gets to chair the EMS board, since I don't think they've had elections in quite some time. And then the second change is we're looking at non-binding rules for Robert's Rules of Order, just as guidance rather than requiring it, but just saying that's something we can refer to. We got the towns comfortable with that language, so we're going to move forward with that. So that's the next change that will be coming forward to us. Probably see that in January when that gets passed. The other item is that ambulance user fees are going to go up modestly. We were looking at where our district is compared to surrounding communities. We're still priced pretty fairly in the way that we do things. So it's just going to reflect inflation, but still going to be lower than some of the surrounding communities. So that's positive. We also formally changed our bank account relationship, or voted to formally change our bank account relationship. We're going from getting about I think it was less than 1% APY on our money market account over there, which we keep about a little over $1 million in that account. We were unhappy with that with the provider that we were getting it. So now we're going to get the local government investment pull rate. I know they're negotiating. It's either going to be plus or minus 50 basis points from that. So we're going to go from 1% to about 4.75 to 5%. So significant improvement on our financial situation there.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other boards, committees, or commissions? No. All right. Thank you, everyone, for the reports. Next up on the agenda is public hearing, and we have 3 public hearings tonight. Our first public hearing is public hearing and discussion / action on a request by Scott and Corinne Meyer to rezone 6105 River Road, Town of Westport, from County R1A to Village R1.
Thank you, Kristen. This was one of the items I mentioned that the Joint Plan Commission reviewed at their meeting last week. Materials are in your packet. This is a fairly simple request to go from the legacy zoning of County R1A to Village R1. At the JPC meeting, there was some discussion about some of the concerns brought up by the town of Westport related to further lot splits. So after deliberation, the Joint Plan Commission decided that a more appropriate zoning designation would be the ER1. The difference there being the R1 would allow lots as small as 9,500 square feet, whereas the ER1, the minimum lot size is 1 acre, And that would mean that the Myers would not be allowed to further split their land, which would take care of much of the concern raised by the town. So now in your staff report on page 26, there is a recommendation that staff saying hold the public hearing but postpone until December 4th. However, after further review, we are comfortable with that ER1 recommendation coming out of the Joint Plan Commission. So we'd recommend approval this evening.
Okay, so we are holding the public hearing.
Yes.
And you're recommending approval. Let's open the public hearing at 6:10. All right, does anyone have a comment or something they'd like to say? All right, is anyone online for the public hearing, Todd?
No.
All right, second call for a comment for the public hearing. All right, seeing none, let's close the public hearing at 6:11. All right, so page 26 of your packet is where you'll find the materials. Does anyone have any comment?
I'll move to postpone action on this item until the December 4th meeting.
So I think staff's recommendation actually upon further review is that we can.
We can approve it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I can actually give you guys a.
Yeah, so
proposed
I will
motion.
move approval of rezoning of the property to the ER1 zoning designation.
Second, go ahead. You can have it, Robert.
Can I just make one comment? Just there's some language in the Joint Planning Commission meeting minutes where I said that the town couldn't do something. I just want to clarify that if we were going to do it on that path, I wanted to talk to the town attorney.
Okay.
So I just want to make clear that I wasn't stepping on the toes of the town attorney through this process, but Tim was able to come up with sounds like a reasonable approach moving forward that the Joint Planning Commission agreed with, and now we have a motion in favor of it. So I just wanted to make that clear.
All right, thank you very much, Brian. All right, Joe.
Oh, I do have a question here. On the Joint Plan Commission meeting minutes, in their public hearing, it looks like it was open for 15 minutes. I'm just curious what happened during that 15 minutes, given that it also says there were no comments from the public.
I think that may not be correct because
Okay.
it was not open that long.
That's what I was hoping for.
I think what may have happened is they opened the public hearing now in recalling that, and that there was quite a bit of discussion by the body during public hearing,
Okay.
and then they closed. So now that would make sense. Yeah, that was 15 minutes.
Okay, I'm fine with that then. Thank you.
All right, not 15 minutes of silence.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, public hearing number 2, public hearing and discussion / action on a request by the Kennedy Family Limited Partnership for a comp plan amendment / rezone / CSM for lands generally located north of Kennedy Road along the west side of the railroad tracks, a half mile west of State Highway 113. And Tim.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Just one moment. There we go. Okay, there are 3 requests or 3 separate actions rather involved with this request. One is an amendment to the Waunakee Westport Comprehensive Plan. What you're seeing on the screen right now, and these materials I believe are in your packet beginning on page 31. But in the box in red are all the affected parcels. So the first piece is an amendment of the comprehensive plan for this 5-acre parcel kind of in the middle of this red area from the community residential designation to the parks, open space and environmental corridor designation. This parcel of land will be acquired by Dane County. And in addition, let me go to the next slide. The second 2 the requests number 2 and 3 as part of this involve 2 CSMs. One of which will be a 2-lot CSM, and it's designated by lot 1 and lot 2 in red on the screen. Hopefully that shows up red. Those lands are in the village. In addition, a 3-lot CSM in the town of Westport, lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, as shown on the screen. And then in addition, the lands for that 3-lot CSM in the town of Westport will be rezoned from the legacy A3 designation to the current Village A1 designation. So this is a little confusing in that some of the lands are in the village, some of the lands are in the town, some of the lands are in the joint planning area, and some of the lands are in the extraterritorial zoning area. So there's a lot of overlap here. So hopefully the materials included in the packet explain this, but again, there are three separate requests, and staff is recommending in favor. The Joint Plan Commission did look at this particular request last week at their meeting, and they recommended approval as well.
All right, so let's open the public hearing on the request by the Kennedy family for a comp plan amendment for these lands. Let's open it at 6:16. Do we have any public comment? All right, thank you, David.
David Kennedy, 702 West Street here in Waunakee. The number one thing that I wanted to point out was we had an error in the documents. It says Kennedy Road. It's Kennedy Drive. Kennedy Road is in Madison on the north side and Kennedy Drive is in Westport. So just for the clarification. And I'd just like to show you, talk about, this is Westport. And this is Waunakee for those people that are not familiar. This parcel here is owned by my brother Tom, his trust, and then the rest of it is owned by the family partnership. And we have some things going on that we're taking Tom out of the county deal and ceding to him his share so that this becomes his parcel. And then after the first of the year, he's buying the rest of it. He wants to keep it ag. So that's. Just wanted to clarify as best I could for you.
Thank you very much, David. Any other comments? Comments online? Okay,
We have the same individual on from before. I don't see a hand raised.
all right. Let's close the public hearing then at 6:17. And the issue board is on page 31 of your packet. Do we have any discussion?
A lot of technical process to get to an end result. It seems like.
So there are three motions with this one. I will make the first motion to approve an ordinance that amends the Waunakee Westport Comprehensive Plan, changing the use category for a 5-acre parcel of land, PIN 0809-153-9330-5, located 500 feet north of Kennedy Road along the west side of the railroad tracks, from the community residential designation to the parks and open space designation, contingent on approval of the same by the Town of Westport Board.
I'll second that.
All right. Yes, Nyla.
Shouldn't it say Kennedy
Drive.
Drive?
Thank you very much. Yes, and I even wrote that down and missed it. All right. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second motion, I'll make the motion to approve 2 certified survey maps for the purposes of clearly identifying the lands that will be owned by Dane County and lands that will remain in the Kennedy family, resulting in 1 2-lot CSM located in the village of Waunakee, along with 1 3-lot CSM located in the town of Westport and within the extraterritorial zoning area ETZ.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And I'll make the third motion to approve a rezoning request to rezone 3 parcels of land, PIN 0809-153-9330-5, -0809-222-8507, 0809-222-8560-5, located in the extraterritorial zoning area from the A3 zoning district to the A1 zoning district.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, David, for coming tonight. All right, item number 3, public hearing and discuss and take action on 2024 budget and 5-year equipment replacement plan. And Renee, that's to you. You're going to show us some slides first.
Yes. Yep, I'll share my screen here and get this thing going.
This is page 58 of your packet. You're following along.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we're in the last stretch here of the budget process, which has been going on for quite a while. We're in the bottom bullet point there. We will be opening the public hearing here in just a minute after I get through these slides. And then following that, the board will consider final budget approval. So since the last meeting, I believe at the last meeting, we only had the MATC levy and the school district levy. We received the county levy, I think it was on Thursday. So that they had a pretty significant increase in the county levy. But they're a smaller part of our tax bill, so keep that in mind. And the other items listed on the bottom there, those are the credits, which are direct deductions from the tax bill. That information came this afternoon, so I don't have anything in here for that. And they all factor in a little bit differently. Particularly the lottery credit is of interest to most people. That is available for people's primary residence only. I do know that amount is about $300. I think it's $300.03 this year. So it went up about $30 over last year. And then the first dollar credit goes on every bill for improved property. So that information, like I said, just came out today. That'll be available when the tax bills come out. So changes to the budget since the November 6th meeting. I have now incorporated the changes for the police union contract. The union has ratified that back on November 8th, and then the board will be discussing that later in the meeting. But you may recall we had already increased the contingency in the budget to cover that. So there, as we'll see on the next slide, there's been no change to the dollars involved in the budget or the tax levy, or I should say the tax levy piece of it. Essentially, I moved it from contingency into the police so that it's more accurate when we start charging or paying those payrolls in 2024. And then some small changes to the ARPA budget that we will talk about on this slide. Oh, one thing I did want to mention, Todd had passed around this revised org chart. And so that's mostly for your information, but it does incorporate the new positions that have previously been discussed and are in the 2024 budget. As far as ARPA goes, so we had some discussion last time. There was some public comment. So I kind of grouped this into two pieces. So the top section are things that are actually in the 2024 budget because we have a quote or a bid for those items. And so we can officially approve their payment in the 2024 budget. The bottom section is just for conceptual approval. It seemed like people were in favor of these items at the last meeting, but there's going to need to be more done before that ARPA money can be spent next year. I know there was discussion about having Waunakee Neighborhood Connection and the Ecumenical Board, put together what they might like to see. The chamber payment, we actually had a pretty good third quarter room tax receipts. And so if the fourth quarter holds or is similar to that, I'm not sure that we will need to dip into any ARPA funds to make the required payment to the chamber. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then the Centennial Park improvements, again, we haven't really bid that out, so we don't know exact dollar amounts that we might want to use for ARPA money. So I kind of listed those separately as conceptual.
for what it's worth, I did already reach out to the food pantry and scheduled a December visit with their director there to find out what they may have in front of them in terms of needs. I serve as a liaison on the WNC board as well, so I'll be able to relay the potential for ARPA support and what they may be interested as well. I'll report early next year.
Thanks. So as I mentioned before, there's really no change to the tax rate since the last meeting. Again, keeping in mind that the rate is going down, that's because we had the interim market update or revaluation. But like I said, were no changes other than sort of that movement of the police dollars out of contingency. So this again tells the better story to make it make sense for how this is going to translate for the village share of the tax bill. Again, that third line, the average village home of about 478,000 would see a $61 increase to their bill. Just put this slide in there again. This is just kind of a reminder that we are hoping to have the board approve the 5-year equipment replacement plan, the details of which were in the packet, all the individual pieces of equipment. And this again will be a kind of on a rolling 5-year basis, which will allow the departments to place their orders when they think it's necessary to get it delivered by the year that it would be budgeted. So we're not really, other than 2024, we're not spending this money early or anything. It's just allows them to order it so that it can be spent in that year when it will be budgeted in the future. Just a reminder, if there's any last changes, a rule of thumb, 10,000 up or down will change the tax rate just slightly, and about $1 up or down to the average home. So after the public hearing, this would be the action that will happen. So maybe this would be the time to open that.
Thank you very much, Renee. Let's open the public hearing at 6:28. Do we have anyone that would like to make a comment on the budget? Do we have anyone online, Todd?
Yeah, just a reminder, I see 2 individuals online attending. If you care to make a comment on the budget, click the raise hand feature and we'll bring you in, allow you to speak.
All right. Second call for any comments for the public hearing on the budget. All right, seeing no hands going up, let's close the public hearing at 6:29 p.m. All right, board. Any discussion? First, thank you very much, Renee, for all of the work that goes into this and all of the staff here who contributed to the budget. I think there are a lot of great highlights in the budget and I'm excited what we're able to do and that our tax increase is really very little compared to what I think we might have expected with inflation rates, what they are over the last year and a half. Any comments from anyone? Nyla? No? Robert?
I was just going to make a motion.
All right. Tricia, did you have a comment? No, okay. All right, anyone else? No? All right.
I move to approve the resolution approving the 2024 Village of Waunakee budget and the 5-year equipment replacement plan.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much again, Renee, and everyone that contributed to this. It's a big lift every year and it was on our end, at least, it felt like a smooth and easy process. All right, next item on the agenda, discuss and take action on options to address sustainability. Todd.
And probably a lot of the conversation will be turned back over to you, President Runge, as you prepared essentially a recommendation memo, having digested what you've heard over the past couple of meetings, what you heard from the presentation at your last meeting. I know we've even had some discussion as recently as this morning with Isaac from the high school about opportunities for us to engage with the eco group there as well. I'll only add for context that I did some research, as I had mentioned I would, with I got information from 6 neighboring communities in Dane County and the status of sustainability committees or their versions of those, how those are staffed by staff, as well as any circumstances where maybe they've made changes from a sustainability committee to some other form. I know that was right in front of your desk here today. I can go through and provide a brief discussion on what we're seeing around the area.
Would you please, Todd?
Sure,
Yeah,
I'm
thank
happy to do that. So again, this is 6 of probably 10 or 12 communities that the Dane County staff person who spoke here last week or at your last meeting, she forwarded an email out to them asking for this information. So McFarland, they hired a company called MSA, large planning firm in the Dane County area, to do a sustainability plan. They did that in coordination with an ad hoc sustainability committee. When that work was completed, the ad hoc committee was disbanded, but essentially combined with what was in a pre-existing natural resources committee. McFarland has a park superintendent forester and an associate planner who work and provide staff support to the committee. Fitchburg, they have what's called the Resource Conservation Commission, which used to be the recycling committee. Almost every community in Wisconsin had a recycling committee about 20 years ago when that legislation came through to move communities in that direction. There they have an environmental engineer on staff and a sustainability specialist on staff, both full-time positions that support the work of that committee. Mount Horeb just recently created a sustainability committee, I think within the past year or so. They received support from their village administrator and then an electric superintendent related to a particular solar project. Middleton has had a sustainability committee since 2009. In particular, and I think I add this because it relates to a request from Isaac at the high school. They have written into their committee design a voting member, student member from the high school. In 2019, they created a full-time sustainability coordinator position to support that work. Stoughton, that's a community you're familiar with, Kristen, and that UW Extension and you yourself were part of their work. Again, relatively new, early stages of a sustainability committee and its work, and they utilized UW Extension to coordinate a study and community engagement process to help determine what they wanted to do. Shorewood Hills actually disbanded what was an ad hoc sustainability committee in January of 2020 after they completed the task before them. What happened there was the formation of a civic group, not under the auspices of the village, called the Green Team. That organization does occasionally offer recommendations to the village bodies, depending on the subject before them. So that's kind of what we're seeing. Communities our size, it appears typical that they've found the need or took action to create sustainability focused staff positions to be in support of the function. That's what we've seen in our area.
All right, thank you very much, Todd. And I'll go over a little bit of what I've been researching the past couple of weeks, some of which is in the memo regarding the 90-day sprint. So I do think it's important that we address this as a community. I had Isaac, kudos to them, had Isaac and the students not come forward now, this probably would have been something that I would have brought up next year. And I think I'm not the only one that would have been in that position to bring it up or had that interest to bring it up. So this is accelerated a little bit than perhaps what we were planning. When we're approaching sustainability, I've got 3 particular goals in mind. First of all, whatever we do, we base in science and technical information that really does address the issue at hand. Sustainability can mean a lot of things over a lot of different different areas of life, ranging from economic sustainability to, water sustainability to whatnot. So I've often seen communities that address sustainability that start out with a scope like this and end up like this and a little bit overwhelmed. Second goal with this, we just today approved hiring new staff people with our new budget. And I would like us to have some of those staff members that will probably be directly involved in whatever a sustainability effort would include, and that would be our communication person, our community development person, and our buildings and facility managers to be on staff as we're making recommendations, because certainly their work would involve whatever it is that this type of effort would result in. And then the third thing I'm hoping is that we're able to keep pushing forward the plans we've already made for the village. So to that end, I've talked with a couple of different people around the state who have facilitated projects, Sharon Lesberg, Sherry Gruder, Tim Bay, all of whom are extension folks, of course, and easy for me to pick up and call. A name came up, a company called Pale Blue Dot Consulting. They worked with Fitchburg on what their baseline assessment was for the community. Fitchburg, as they were making their sustainability plans, they started out with an assessment that covered 4 different areas of sustainability that gave them measurable goals that they could do that fell within the authority that they had, that are consistent with the scientific information behind them. It is a public participation heavy process. It is not facilitated by staff. It's facilitated by the consultant from Pale Blue Dot Consulting. It is relatively affordable, between $15,000 and $17,000. We could probably find some money to do that. Not that they're the only one out there that does this, but this seemed to fit a lot of what we've discussed. Student involvement, public participation, opportunities for board members to lead on the subject, a very community involved process. Their process takes between 3 and 6 months to do, 6 months on the long end if you're looking at a larger public participation input. They do everything from surveys to meetings and whatnot. So it would look in some sense a little bit like the Housing Task Force did, where we're drawing on community members to serve in this capacity and determine the vision for sustainability in the community. Now, again, it doesn't need to be that specific consultant, but I think that would fill in some of the gaps that we have. Isaac is right. There are all of these great regional, state, Great Lakes region studies. But when we talk about specific to Waunakee, what does our own greenhouse gas emissions look like? What do we have the ability to change? What do our practices, what are our electricity loads look like? That is all on such a micro level that we can take those county studies or those regional studies and think we're hitting the ball in the right direction, but we're aiming it here, and we just get a little bit off and we end up really off track. So if we're going to do something, I would really like to have scientists and technical experts giving us advice on what we can do. So that's my pitch to the group. This is new to us as a community. A lot of us have been involved in these efforts for a long time, or have careers that involve those efforts, or have gone to schools that involve those efforts. So with that, let's open it up for discussion. Nyla, I see you're writing down a number of things. Yeah, so.
I was basically writing down the information pertaining to the Pale Blue Dot Consulting and some of the other information you gave. I do have a couple of things that I wrote as I looked at this. One, I would like to see 3 members from the Board of Trustees on a committee. It's like Robert said at the previous meeting, we would like to have trustee input, and when it comes back to the board, a lot of trustee support for whatever the committee comes up with. I would honestly like to see high school students involved. And I think we need to remember that we not only have public high schools in the community, we have private high schools. And then I don't know what the population is in Waunakee, but we've worked close with the Ho-Chunk tribe. And those young people probably have a completely different perspective than we do. So that's a suggestion. The timeline concerns me. It's very vague. I would like to see more of a timeline instead of vagueness. So those are my comments.
We'll go back to ping pong.
So I have a few questions, comments. First off, I do agree with trustee Frye. It does need to be 3 trustees. It needs to be match our other committees. Reiterating what I said the last time. Second, I also agree, we do need to have high school / youth representation. It needs to have voting power. One of the questions I had, Todd, with Mount Horeb, is that a permanent committee?
My understanding is it is.
Okay. I dislike within the proposal that it's ad hoc. I feel that I know you took a little offense when I made the comment about the housing committee, but that was also ad hoc. And I do worry that a non-established committee is going to just do its work, disband, and then may or may not have things taken up for it. I further have some concerns as well with, I did quick look up that consultants. I mean, that's just it's a husband and wife duo in Minnesota is doing that. So I think that if the will of the board is that we engage with professionals, which I'm gonna get into that in a second, I think that we should definitely go through a full RFP process to see who's out there who does it. I mean, I know that you personally may know people through extension and things like that, but I think it should stand up to the normal governance process of review. It sounds like you might know some people, but I would want to make sure that we're not giving the perception that it's people who through your employer, are looking for a nice contract with the village. So we still do need to have that level of separation, in my opinion. As far as engaging with experts, I mean, we have a lot of pre-research that's already been done. There's a lot of things that are publicly available out there. I understand there may be some concern about, if we're not a climate professional, how we, I mean, there's things that we have been told by outside groups already that we can take action on. I wouldn't use that as a reason to delay starting the work. You might want to run something concurrently with it. So you'd say, okay, we're going to establish this committee, and then they're going to start doing some work. And simultaneously, if there's areas that we just do not have data on, sure, let's go out and consider having somebody do that. But there are definitely certain things that we can take steps on now that we know we can take steps on. Some good example, and I know I love to talk about boring things like zoning and parking, but we do have an existing study from CNU that talks about things that the village can do that have environmental impacts, for example. So a lot of other people have done work already and have been kind of telling us like, hey, you should do these things. So I don't know that we necessarily need to pay a third party to have somebody restate what's already out there. And I think that as far as staffing goes, in the memo, there's quite a few people that were asking for their time on there. I see in other municipalities that it's less people involved. I think that's actually better. I don't know that I would agree with having as many people on there unless they really wanted to spend their time in an additional meeting. But I will state that while I do think it's interesting that some municipalities have hired additional staff to do that, I would just state that Middleton, it looks like, didn't get there until 10 years of their committee existing before they hired somebody. So if anybody's concerned that we need to go hire somebody tomorrow, if we do move forward with this, I think that we would need to scope it out a bit further before we realize that, there's a position that would need to be hired to do that. I'll stop my comments there.
Trisha.
I do think, well, I agree, Robert, that there's a lot that has been done in the community. I think getting our arms around what we have here is almost a necessary baseline just to figure out, take inventory of that and then help with an engagement process in the community, identifying where the priorities are, kind of balance it between the whether it's, different aspects of the community in general. And I think, Kristen, you gave some good examples of what this could be in different, whether it's economic or environmental, all of the different things. I think having right now, just with the recruitment of the community development director, that having a person like that to be able to help staff it or lead it would be important. So I do think, and I'm looking at Todd and all the things that you've got on your plate right now in the next couple of months, not trying to overwhelm and do this not hastily, but still keep it a priority. Just trying to balance the resources that we have to help make it happen. I think is a good framework. I think that we're going down a good direction. I'm fine with the three village, the trustees as well. I think that's fine and that's fair. That's, I guess I didn't really have any strong opinions either way, other than just those comments.
Tricia, Joe.
I basically agree with what's been said. I have a little bit of a concern. There's just this little piece of me that says, is this something that is going to grow and grow and grow from a budget standpoint, from a cost standpoint, that sort of thing? I look at a lot of the things that we have coming up in the village that frankly, I think are a lot closer to needs than wants. I'm not going to say that we shouldn't do this, but it's just a matter of kind of balancing that and making sure that we can pay for the things that we have to pay for.
Thanks, Joe.
Mhm.
Sam.
I would say my biggest concern that I have is I think it's really important for one youth member to have voting power. I remember 5 years ago, I hit Chris Zellner pretty hard on having 2 voting power spots on the housing task force, which I eventually won out on. And we see other communities. I'm working with the city of Milton right now on a youth empowerment project, getting youth on committees and so forth. And I actually had an interesting discussion the other day specifically about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And when we talk about sustainability, yes, it is broad, but a key aspect of that is social sustainability. And one of the easiest ways to get there is through youth empowerment by giving them a seat at the table. And I definitely agree, 3 trustees, but one of those citizen spots should absolutely be for a high school student.
I would envision we'd probably have 2 like we did in the housing task force, because that was a pretty tough.
Yeah, we could do 2 as well.
Erin.
I'm excited to see this. I enjoyed getting to watch the presentation last time, and I know this is an effort of a lot of staff and community involvement to get here. I think that this is a great starting point to have the ad hoc committee. I would hope personally that it can transition into a full-time committee, but I think it's a great stepping stone to really narrow down. If we just say we're going to have a sustainability committee, like Kristen said, there's so many ways. Sustainability does not even cover itself, all of the climate and environmental challenges in our world. So I think this is a good place for us to start to then hone down, like, what are we charging this committee with? I don't want us to just create a committee to create a committee and then say, well, we have a committee, so they're doing the work for everyone in every facet of caring about the environment. So I think I would like to see maybe more timeline, and maybe that's us just asking for it back on the agenda and checking in. So hopefully we can get this started sooner than later. But I think you said that having a consultant and kind of what Trisha said, like, there are things that exist, but if we can just gather that and hone down, like, what are we working on for this? It would be great. So.
All right. Thank you, Erin.
I'm excited.
Pale Blue Dot Consulting is simply the group that answered my call when I called. I was cold calling companies. I do not have a solid recommendation for one or the another. I think that their approach was reasonable. I think companies similar to that or consultants similar to that would be reasonable. Would our next step forward be perhaps to get some more information on who and how we could tap into guiding us with this process? Other consultants, perhaps? Do you want to see examples of work that's been done? What would you like to see as the next step?
Is it your desire to, since you kind of have run with this one, is it your desire to put forth a committee for the rest of us to vote on, what the charge is and things like that? I'm not familiar. My child was born when the housing task force was formed, so I didn't get to watch those meetings back then. But I mean, what was the process that the village went through the last time that it made a committee this big? I guess maybe I can ask Todd.
So I came on after it was decided to do something, and I don't know that the something, Sharon and I and you and Todd and Chris met. And I'm not sure what happened before that, but I know what happened once we came into the process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about
Right.
this committee.
You and Green. So if you want to jump in.
Okay.
Diane.
I mean, one of the questions I would have for you is, do you want, I mean, you have the ability to create a sustainability committee that then is going to do some of the legwork and provide guidance to you and make a recommendation, and then you act on it. Or at this point, do you still want essentially there not to be a committee and have the village board make the initial decisions? I mean, I did work on the resolution that was in the packet before. I basically took exactly what you had and just tweaked it. I mean, in doing that, I noticed that we do have standing committees like the Police Committee, Public Works Committee, Parks and Recreation Committee in our code. I mean, one school of thought is just to keep it at the village board level right now, in which case it's probably going to be a standing agenda item and you guys are all going to be making the decisions. Another school of thought is to create a committee. I mean, and whether I wouldn't get caught up with the name, whether it's ad hoc, standing, what have you. At the end of the day, it's going to be a committee that you control, and it's going to exist as long as you want it to exist, no matter what it's called. But you've already had some discussions about membership. I mean, one of the things that you have that's in the ordinance is the membership. So if you just want to keep it at the village board level, I wouldn't even create the committee right now. If you want the committee to effectively start working and making recommendations to the village board, I think consistent with what's in our code right now, we'd bring back an ordinance amendment for the next village board meeting. You would create the committee, and then essentially, especially if you have 3 village board members on there, you essentially dictate to the committee, you come up with what your goals are. You come up with RFPs for potentially working with third parties and things of that nature. So really, to me, it comes down to, where do you want the legwork to be done? And if it's at this body, I'm not sure I don't think that you necessarily need to create a committee right now.
I think I'd prefer it to stay at this body for the moment. A couple of reasons behind that. A committee requires staffing. We're headed into December and a lot of year-end vacations. And I mean, we've got a lot going on. Second, then if we're creating a committee, it feels like that's going to delay the work a little bit. I feel like we could use this next month to really talk about what we want as a board. What would that look like? What would our end result be? And then perhaps late December, early January, form the committee after having talked to some consultants and getting an idea of what's out there. And what we could do, and be just really intentional with it. I'm afraid when we create open-ended committees, oftentimes lacking a firm charge, it just delays action. I would love to see this have a strong, sharp focus that we know what we're going after here.
So I guess my concern then is that there has been, and I mean this with no disrespect to anybody saying this here, because this includes myself, there have not been any resolutions, actions, or anything put forth in the past 5-6 months, from this board to take any concrete steps for some of the known issues that are out there. So my concern is, and why I favor a committee model over keeping it at the board, is because in a committee model, I mean, you can give it, whoever's the chair of that is setting the agenda of that. So if you say you want to make yourself the chair of it, and we agree to that, then it's, you can set the agenda out there and say, these are the items that we're going to discuss. I don't think it's necessarily open-ended if we're just setting that the charge of the committee is that they're going to engage in, sustainability, whatever we want to end up calling it. And then the chair, the trustee chair, is going to drive that conversation. I mean, if there is nothing that requires us to have staff dictate to us what we need to talk about in this committee, we can control that. And but I mean, that's just my concern. If it stays here, I would want to know, how long is it going to stay here? Because every meeting that we go through, I mean, there's going to be an election in 3-4 months. So we're going to have to potentially have a whole new set of people in here who may say, look at this and say, I don't want to do this anymore. And suddenly it dies. So, I mean, I just am concerned that if the time is now to get this done, let's get it established. So and then you can control those other items by having 3 trustees in there.
I guess my concern is that if we're establishing a committee without a firm charge, then it is those three committees rather than the entire board that is feeding into the purpose of the committee. I might not be reading the room right, but I think everybody in here is at least interested in something happening on this and might like a say in what the outcome and what the charge is. We can bring it back this meeting and the next, and by the end of December, would we say that's a reasonable timeline for understanding what a charge would be? And then taking action to form a committee? So that would be more discussion over the next couple of meetings.
I have seen how slow things can move at a snail's pace. I would like to see this move faster than a snail's pace. And, you know, once we decide, if as a board, we decide what directions we want to go and what the topics will be and what we're focusing on, then it takes additional time to receive applicants, go through those applications, assign a committee. And I don't understand why we could not be working at these two things at the same time. We as a board can be having our discussions and trying to decide which direction we want to go. And at the same time, put information out there for the public saying we want to start this committee. What it may encompass, are you interested in at least have the application process going so this can be moved along faster? That's my idea. I think it's very important that we have the public involved in this as soon as possible. And if we don't get things rolling, it can take forever. I've seen it more than once.
Thank you, Nyla. Erin?
I just think that there's so many things that like this committee, sorry, we have so many committees right now that like could benefit from having more like emphasis on sustainability within their own charge. Like we don't, and I think part of the creative committee, we need the village board to then say like what involvement do this sustainability committee, whatever, have with those other committees, like rather than just them making recommendations to us with things we've already charged out to other committees to do. Or just, I feel like things are bouncing around and even in the scope of, like Kristen said this earlier, like what do we actually have the jurisdiction to do and like what changes in our controls rather than, you know, taking all of these plans, all of these studies. It's like we just don't even have direction of like what exactly are we focusing on? Just land use? Are we focusing on energy, on food systems? Like there's so many things you could go down, and just saying like, well, this sustainability committee is going to handle them all, I don't think is realistic for like what this board is even trying to achieve right now. But so I think if it stays here and then in the next month or two, we can decide what do we want? Who in the village are we asking for? Are we asking for, yeah, I could go on another list of 1,000 things, but I just don't think we have really any structure yet.
Joe? Did you have something? No, nothing. Trisha?
No, maybe a question for Todd when you were, I don't know if you were having conversations or just kind of looking up what these communities have done, but did any of them give you any like cautionary guidance or things that they maybe would have done differently when they were establishing their groups or their efforts?
I wasn't able to get that deep. I had conversation with my colleague in Mount Horeb, who was kind of right out of the gate on this. I would say that most of the sustainability staff who talked about this seemed to talk more about the community education that they're involved in. They didn't call it window dressing or anything like that, but it seems more about public education, programming, exhibits, being in front of the community with information. That's what I've heard from probably five of these 6 who kind of reference that as the work they do. I might just sort of echo what Erin and Kristen suggested. I'm definitely hearing the interest from all of you, but I'm hearing differences on how to implement it. And Brian whispered in my ear, this may best be taken up at a special meeting, single topic meeting of the village board to do sort of a more orchestrated, deeper dive into the discussion. We could have a couple folks from a couple of these committees come and present on that experience. And then those are perfect questions to poke straight at the people who are just starting out doing the work right now, as well as those maybe who've been doing it since 2009. That can help cement the board's decision to collectively on how best to approach this. We could even have a consultant or two, not on our nickel, but they'll always come and talk about what they do for communities. It's part of their marketing.
You bet they will.
Part of the marketing shtick. They can come and you can ping and poke at them too. So seems like we've entered a topic that could do well by a dedicated meeting for that sole purpose.
I like that idea. I'll say from my experience working with sustainability committees, sometimes if they don't have a sharp focus, they're so widely diffused that the end result ends up being a strong recommendation that everybody uses LED bulbs and nothing really consistent with moving the needle on a topic. So I love the idea of bringing in some of these people and having a special meeting. What would you guys think about that? So it doesn't feel like we've reached consensus yet.
I would encourage or consider possibly extending that invitation like to the planning commission or the park and rec committee, CDA, whichever, I think there's a lot of relevancy into what the discussion would include based on what they're charged with also.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Does that sound like a reasonable way forward?
Do we need a motion then to set the special meeting?
Do we need a motion to set the special meeting?
I would suggest that I appreciate the fact that your other committees need to get involved, but you're gonna have too many cooks in the kitchen. I would have it just be a special board meeting for just the 7 of you to make, at the end of the day, assuming that you're gonna create this committee, and even if it's gonna be relatively focused, then you set the focus and then the other committees react to the focus, as opposed to you guys having too many people coming in here and because you're the decision makers, I guess. So that would just be my suggestion. I don't think you need a motion, but at the same time,
a motion never hurts.
you already have a number of people who are going to be here on December 11th for a plan commission meeting, I'm guessing. So you can easily set a meeting after the plan commission meeting if you wanted to. That would give you 3 and just because you have a special board meeting on this doesn't mean you can't discuss it on the 4th or the 18th. You could make a lot of progress if you discuss this issue on the 4th, 11th, and 18th. I would just say.
And if we're successful at having the right people here to help arm you with good information and answers to your question that very night, instead of waiting for research to happen and then back in a couple of weeks, that could be really powerful to arm you with information you need to make a decision.
All right. So December 11th.
I would say that your agenda item is broad enough that if somebody did want to make a motion to have a special board meeting on December 11th after the plan commission meeting, they certainly could make that motion.
I like it permanent, so I'll motion that we set a special meeting on December 11th, immediately following the conclusion of the plan commission meeting.
Aaron?
I'm just trying to check my calendar, but I'll second.
All right. All right.
We're set on it.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. We're gonna have a busy December. All right. Next item on the agenda, discuss and take action on the ordinance rescinding no mow may. And this is page 149 of your packet. All right, and that's Brian.
So my understanding, if there's an ordinance on pages 151 and 152 of your packet. So back in April of 2022, the village amended section 78-1 of the village code by adding what is the red language on page 152 of the packet. My understanding is the village board is now interested in removing this exemption. And so the easiest way to show it was just essentially if you pass this ordinance that is on pages 151 and 152, we're going to go back to the language that existed prior to April of 2022 and just remove the exemption.
All right. Any discussion on the action?
I'd like to make the motion. Move to adopt an ordinance amending chapter 78, article 1 of the Code of Ordinances, Village of Waunakee, to remove the no mow may exemption.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion?
I have I guess just sort of a random thought, and that is, we put no mow may in, we didn't force anyone to do it. By taking it away, we're forcing them not to. Purely because of that, I can't support getting rid of it. I just don't think there's enough. There are a lot of things that say, yeah, it probably isn't good. But I don't know that we're quite to that critical mass of, we know that it absolutely is not good and we don't want anybody doing it. So.
All right. Other comments, other discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, abstentions? All right, motion carries. Item number 4. Item number 3, excuse me. Discuss and take action on policy for remote participation by elected and appointed members of village boards, committees, and chairmen. And this is on page, let me see here, 153. All right, of your packet. And I'll open discussion, or well, actually, Todd.
Well, I'll just say that I took a stab at a red line version of the version 1 that you saw at your last meeting to version 2 here in this packet. Tried to get at some of the things that I was hearing that there seemed to be consensus on from the board. I added a couple other things. Robert actually reached out to the town of Westport, and they sent their policy, which is actually surprisingly flexible, almost to afford almost any version of participation so as to accommodate their members. I did take a couple snippets out of that I thought made some sense, incorporated that here. Again, addressed some of your concerns. You probably saw them in the red tracked edits. I'd only add one note from a staff member who asked the question about who noted that there are some committees in different facilities that meet and don't have this technology, or run into some sort of blip in accessibility at a meeting that can't accommodate video as the solution. I have a one sentence addition that that department and I had worked on that I would suggest you could take it on at the very end if you want or not. And that would be, there may be circumstances where technical limitations or connectivity disruptions create a situation where virtual participation via video is impossible. In such cases, the presiding official of said body shall be authorized to allow remote participation by phone or other similar means. So that is an option I would toss out there based on what I heard from another department. Other than that, staff is open to other edits or adjustments, and look to your feedback.
All right, thank you. And I'll open discussion with this. For me, this is really an equity issue. We've had since the beginning of August, 2 instances that weren't work related, but were health related, where committee members who have strong voices and ask good questions in meetings were unable to attend because of the ban on virtual participation. One was at the recent Plan Commission, where we were reviewing the TID that we'll be discussing tonight. And the person called in their comments during public comment, but having served before, the questions that people ask, the discussion that takes place with committee members who are able to fully participate but cannot for some reason be here physically. When we miss that, I feel we're silencing voices and we're not having the proper public dialogue that we need to fully vet issues and bring up concerns that community members have. I don't personally see this as an instance where people are going to be sitting at home and just not want to leave their house. I can imagine we would all have something to say about that. But there are times when people, really do need to participate virtually, when we need to hear those voices at our committee meetings and our board meetings. So that's my opinion on it. I don't think the intent when this was passed was to exclude people who have health conditions or are working shift jobs and can get away from meeting but can't be here. I don't think that was all the intention of it. But I do think sometimes the impacts that we see after it's been in effect for a while are maybe not the impacts we're hoping for. So with that, let's open discussion and let's ping pong again. Nyla, would you like to start?
I would like to go last.
Okay.
I just want to make a point of clarification.
Mhm.
There's not a hearing tonight on TID 10.
Let me, yeah, it was the CDA meeting, not the planning
Yes.
commission meeting. And
Sorry,
we,
I'm sorry.
so when we get to the last agenda item, and I would say that a lot of the discussion can be open session, we are not discussing the project plan or creation of TID 10. Just-
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Attended one too many meetings this month. Yeah. All right. So would like Tricia?
I've been pretty vocal about supporting something like this because of certain situations that come up when we have 2 Mondays a month that are for the board meeting, and then we have multiple committee meetings that we all are very committed to, and sometimes work things. I almost was not going to be able to attend the planning commission because of a unforeseen travel for a pre-bid meeting that was outside of Wisconsin. Luckily, I was able to get that rearranged, but I was afraid, given the amount of items that were on the planning commission agenda, that like my absence would cause them to not have quorum, and was feeling absolutely horrible about being in that position. Where if I had been able to have the option to join remotely, I would have had, you know, hotel room or wherever could be 100% focused. So it wouldn't have been, it would have been able to give my full attention to the conversation. And I think that's kind of the situations that hopefully something like this could help to just, you know, not put an entire agenda at risk of not having quorum or something like that, or even just being able to participate and hear the discussion, especially if something is going to be coming back to the board for final or full approval, to not, you know, be able to ask the questions that you want to ask during that conversation that you feel are important or relevant to the discussion. So.
Thank you, Tricia. And Joe.
Basically, I've got two different thoughts on this. The first one, being an IT guy, an awful lot of what I do is remote. I just finished a project in my full-time job that spanned multiple months. I worked with literally dozens of people who I have never physically met, and that project was incredibly successful. So it's certainly not a requirement that everybody physically be in person. I mean, if nothing else, the pandemic certainly showed us that. That being said, the other side of that is in a governmental situation, I think there's a lot of benefit to having that physical interaction, having a closer look at the reactions that somebody has to whatever the topic might be. So I think there's a good reason to encourage everyone to physically attend here. But we do need exceptions to that. And that's where I kind of get to my second point. The policy that was previously passed that basically did not allow that at all, any sort of remote attendance, probably had some good thoughts when it was put together. But like most policies, like most things that we pass, we may pass them and then look and go, well, you know, maybe we need to tweak that piece. Maybe we need to change this other piece. Maybe we missed the target completely. So I think what we've got in front of us is a nice adjustment to where we were. I don't in any way think that it's going to be perfect. I suspect, you know, fast forward 6 months, we're probably going to go, well, yeah, we need to change that piece of it. We need to, you know, I don't remember the specific numbers in here, you know, maybe we need to allow more, maybe we need to allow less, maybe there's, you know, whatever. It can't really be a living document. But I think we need to realize that it's not going to be perfect. We'll work with it and we'll change as we need to. That's
Thank you, Joe. Erin.
Yeah, I think this is a good change to our current no virtual at all that we discussed in January, or different form of this body did. I don't think that entirely virtual is the answer, but I think just like having this as an option is better for our community in so many ways. It's the village, sorry, during the pandemic, like the village we still did our work. The great things came out of that, and that was entirely virtual. And we've been entirely in person, and I think a good balance in between. I am really curious how often this will even be used, if at all. I don't want us to play what if and then lose the opportunity to have insightful questions and good public dialogue just because we're unsure of how this will play out in the future. I think that having hybrid options is just really important for us to be more accessible to us, a body, to allowing people on committees and boards, and just making it possible to have a seat at the table, even if your life doesn't, follow the schedule every single time. So that's my take.
Aaron, Sam.
Well, I will note that this policy is certainly an improvement over the policy that we had at the last meeting. However, when it comes to encouraging in-person participation, I think that needs to have specific teeth. We discussed briefly at the last meeting, and I've felt strongly for a number of years that the 2/3 in-person attendance threshold for committees as well as this board is low. I would consider supporting this policy if that threshold is raised to 3/4 or 75%.
Robert.
Sam makes a good point there. If we're going to open this up to virtual attendance, then we should increase the amount of attendance. And what we also discussed last time is that magical document that Brian wished that I didn't bring up about it does exist. And we don't know how legal it is, but it exists. So I think I would agree with that. I did have a very productive conversation with Administrator Grosskopf of Westport, that's why he ended up sending over his not his version, but Westport's version of it. And theirs was pretty liberal compared to what we were discussing. But I am glad to see that you did pull out that language about limitations due to pandemic and things like that. So I'm a big fan of borrowing from other municipalities when it makes sense. I'm going to be honest, as a parent of a 7-year-old, I miss things to be here. So it comes with it. I ran for office knowing that there would be things that I would have to choose to be here for over doing family things. I too work in a job that requires leaving the state. I have missed conferences that I almost lost my accreditation for being certified anti-money laundering specialist because we had a meeting I needed to be at. So would I use a virtual thing? Yes, but I recognize it's a sacrifice you make when you're in office. So it's a very ambivalent answer for me on how I feel about this in general, but I think I can get behind what Sam stated there. If we are going to open this up, then we do need to put in an actionable penalty if we are going to, if you're going to miss more than 25% of the meetings, because now there's not going to be an excuse.
All right. Nyla.
Okay, first of all, I need a clarification. On page 156, the second paragraph, it talks about no more than 4 virtual non-consecutive meetings. And then where it's redlined, it says in no more than 3 virtual non-consecutive meetings.
The 3 was for bodies other than the village board.
Okay, thank you
Yep.
for clarifying that. And then before I start making my comments, I just have one question for Brian. In January, when the previous board went over this or had this discussion, you seemed to not be in favor of board members coming in on Zoom meetings and voting. Now I really don't know what your opinion is, and I would like to know really what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's your decision. It can be done. I've heard some comments. I went back and watched that meeting. I've heard some public comments that quite frankly misstated what I said at that meeting, because quite frankly, I didn't really say anything in that meeting. If you want to have a virtual meeting, you guys could be all virtual right now if you wanted to. We would just have to, open up the room so people could come in. And if all 7 of you wanted to be virtual, you would comply with the open meetings law. That is the key. We just have to make sure that whatever we do is in compliance with the open meetings law. And the one thing that I would tell you that you can't have is you can't have just a purely virtual meeting where you wouldn't allow people come here. Because to me, there are some people who don't have computers. That's what you were able to kind of do during the pandemic, was not have a physical meeting place, even if there were 7 computer screens sitting up here. Other than that, you have the ability to essentially set the policy that you want as long as it complies with the open meetings law. I believe that this policy would.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to, though. Again, it is a purely discretionary decision on your part.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Okay, first of all, the 5-day notice for, suggested 5-day notice to be able to come in on a Zoom meeting. I see the reason to come in on a Zoom meeting is perhaps because you're on vacation, or it's a family emergency, or is something pertaining to that. And one of the problems I have with the 5-day notice is, I'm not saying it has happened or it would happen, but I'm just bringing it up. If you give 5 days notice, is there a possible manipulation of the agenda? Will something be rushed and put on the agenda because they know a board member is not attending? I don't know. I'm just bringing that possibility up. One of the things I would like an answer to, which we haven't really discussed, I don't know anything about going on cruises. I've never been on one, but somebody told me that if you're on a cruise and you want to Zoom out or use the internet, there's a cost with that. If that's the case, would the village be responsible for paying for that cost, or would the person who's using the services? Kristen talked about equity. I understand things about equity. And one of the things is the entire state does not have equity when it comes to high-speed internet. It is not available in all areas. So some of us that go to remote areas of the state, it would be very, very, very difficult to come in on a Zoom meeting, just so you're aware of that. I agree that I am not comfortable with changing this so people can come in on Zoom unless we raise the number of total meetings that can be missed, and it's in conjunction with this coming in on Zoom meetings. When I was elected to office, I would have been ashamed to be counting on coming in on Zoom meetings and not being here in person for many reasons. One, the people in the village elected me. Number 2, I take my responsibility very seriously. And number 3, if I'm going to vote on policy or other decisions that pertain to every resident in this village, it's my responsibility to be able to look them in the eye when I do it. That's just where I am. You can say it's old fashioned. Yes, it's old fashioned. I understand that people want to take their vacations. I don't have a problem with Zoom meetings, but I don't want it to be a large number. I don't want it to get out of hand. I want people to take this position very seriously. The previous board did take it seriously. We had people coming in on crutches. We had people that were terminally ill who still attended the board meetings. And I think they set a standard. And like I said, that's just where I am. But I am willing to work with the board in conjunction with the total number of meetings that could be missed, along with using Zoom meetings to come in for some of those meetings. Thank you.
All right. Other comments?
I had totally forgotten to mention during mine, would like to see language added, and I think it's not dissimilar to Todd, what you had brought up. We do need to have the carve out for, meetings that take place in facilities that do not have Zoom capability, may not apply to that. I mean, fire and EMS will never have this, and parks, meeting in parks and things like that.
Utilities doesn't have it either, so.
Yeah, they don't have one over that nice building over there doesn't have it.
Not set up for
That-
Zoom in
That
the
conference room
board.
looks awesome, by the way. It
It
needs
does.
teleconferencing.
Can I
Yeah.
ask, so if you do that, are you going to provide a call-in number? Because one of the benefits of Zoom now is there's 2 things to keep it. If you have somebody call in, then everybody who's sitting in the room has to be able to hear it, including other people in the audience. One of the benefits of Zoom is people can attend from the public and not be here, but still hear everything because it's on Zoom. The only way you would be able to accommodate that with telephone is if you, as opposed to just setting up the speaker, are you going to also allow for a call in so that the public, and I'm not saying you have to answer this question right now, but to be more similar to Zoom, it wouldn't just be the member calling in on their cell phone and then having a speaker so everyone in the room could hear it. You would post as the agenda a call-in number that the member would utilize, and then any other member of the public could utilize. Then it would be more like Zoom.
We do have a carve out in here. I thought it says that if their camera's offline, that they don't count towards quorum. So if they're calling in, they wouldn't count towards quorum, right?
Well, but I mean, you guys right now are talking about, if I understood correctly, you're talking about a carve out that would allow committees that do not have Zoom to allow someone to participate via phone?
I
Oh,
was
okay.
saying that if it's not capable, that it's at the discretion of the committee to not allow for this because we can't.
Okay.
Saying that we don't have to apply this equally to all committees, just that it only applies to the committees that have access to like this room, for example, and meet here.
Okay, was that what you were
That
getting
is
at?
what I'm saying, Brian.
Okay,
that-
okay.
I mean, and hey, before this was ever a topic, believe me, the speakerphone in the middle of the desk has been used by many of our committees in other rooms in our government. So, and there may be those circumstances, in particular in cases where maybe quorum would be a challenge if not for a speakerphone in the middle of the table. And it was Tim at the utilities. That's what he brought up, was he's got two members of the commission that spend 3 months, I think, out of the year in warmer climate. Good for them. But if that jeopardizes the ability to accomplish business at the commission level because someone can't call in, that's a problem in Tim's perspective.
But I guess, is the policy, in other words, if it's going to be virtual, it has to be Zoom? Or are you creating a carve out for a facility that does not have Zoom capabilities that then you would allow someone to call in via phone?
Correct.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, if you're going to do that, do you also want to have the rule that it's got to be, since you're not having an agenda item with Zoom and a link for Zoom, that there is a call-in telephone number that the members of the public could also utilize the call-in number?
I would say we could do that if we had the advance notice of the absence to then prep the number and prep the agenda.
Yeah, and so I guess that's, I mean, to me, if you're going to allow Zoom, and then you're gonna have facilities that don't allow Zoom, but you want to allow call-in, the way to be most similar with the Zoom virtual process is utilization of the telephone conference number, which then would allow members of the public to phone in also the same way that they can join via Zoom. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at with the telephone conference concept.
But where I was going with that also is that we need committees that can say, like, we're not doing, like, the discretion of the committee, that we're not allowing any virtual because it's not feasible. That's why I brought up.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's
Yep.
why I brought up like fire and EMS.
Yep.
It's not feasible to have even a speakerphone in there because those rooms aren't set up for that.
The Parks Committee meeting in a park shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Eric.
Is this saying that it needs the full setup, or like a lab, like in case of emergency, a laptop on or a phone on a table is what I was
I think
understanding.
right now, my understanding of the
okay.
policy is you need a full setup like this room right now. So it sounds like you have the full setup like this room. You have the committees that essentially the chair says, we're not going to do Zoom and we're not going to do call in, and you're essentially giving the discretion to the committee member to do that. If they're going to allow a call in, you should try to make it as much like Zoom as possible. So do it with a telephone conference call in that the public could come in. And those are essentially the three options. In other words, the problem with the laptop is it doesn't allow necessarily members of the public who are in the audience to be able to follow. And so that's why.
So are we requiring then all of our boards and committees to meet in this room?
No.
No? Okay.
Nyla?
Maybe someone has more information, but the question I have about if someone wants to attend come through on Zoom and they're on a cruise or some way that they have to pay for the services, I'd like to know how those services are going to be paid. If it's going to be something the trustee pays for, or if it's, or the committee member, or how that's going to be paid?
My answer to that, Nyla, would be if it's to allow the body member to participate, to fulfill their obligations, the village should and would compensate or reimburse for that. I speak to it because I know that as staff, when we found ourselves in circumstances to have to perform work related to our job, the village would pay for that service.
Okay, this is hypothetical. I live in a very remote of this area of the state. It'll be 1 to 2 years before we even have high-speed internet. I will not get it because I would choose not to use it, but I wouldn't expect the village to pay for the service charge because it costs, the lowest speed there costs more than the highest speed here.
Okay, I follow you. I'm not thinking about providing a subscription to a cabin up north. I'm thinking a day pass on a cruise ship is probably $20.
Yeah, but my point is.
You know how much a day pass is?
Having been on many cruises and scheduled for another, yes.
Yeah, but
You don't want to pay for that.
But what I'm talking about is equity and fairness.
I mean, people are still gonna miss, like, this
Yeah.
isn't taking that away. There's a lot of situations where you're not going to be able to be here. This is just making it easier. Or if someone's choosing on their vacation to zoom in, right? Like, some people would just say, no, sorry. And
Yeah.
so I think that we're just getting into a lot of those what ifs. It's like, people are still going to be gone. People are gonna have emergencies, like.
Yeah, I agree. I think I consider this as like unforeseen circumstances, things that you just can't get around or get out of. I don't plan on calling in when I'm on vacation. I feel like that's like your
Yeah.
time that you've said, this is for my family and this is, so I think that those are the instances.
I mean, I can't say that I agree with that because I would have called in during my vacation to vote against a TID and it would have prevailed and it would have broke a tie. And
I'm not saying you
But, like,
couldn't. I'm
that's-
just saying I probably wouldn't.
but I'm just saying like if it's important enough, I feel like you'll call in during a
But that's,
vacation.
we're saying like, we don't need the policy to decide like who and when you're, like, that's your decision, not like. They have to say where they are, like, yeah.
The policy.
Okay, so I have one other question.
Yes.
Like I said, I can support this a little bit, providing it's done in conjunction with the total number of absences. And we have work to do on that. Can we vote on this tonight?
I was gonna say, let's bring it back into the kind of the issues that question. I feel like absences is an issue. So thumbs up, thumbs down. Would we want to lower the number of absences to 25% only?
Clarification,
Yes.
do virtually attended meetings count as part of that or not?
Yes.
They count as an absence?
Not as an absent, but as an not in-person participation.
No, Joe's asking,
But-
Joe's asking,
Yeah.
does that
Yeah.
count as an absence?
What I was thinking when I say I could support it is if we get it down to 25% absences, then when you come in on Zoom and you're not in person, and you'd have whatever number of Zoom meetings that count within that number.
Your Zoom meeting attendance counts as an absence is what you want.
No, I'm saying you are allowed to miss so many meetings and you can use Zoom meetings for part of those. I'm not saying you're absent. I'm saying you're using part of that time for a Zoom meeting, because otherwise, if it's 25% absences you can have and you add 4 Zoom meetings to it, that's really, we're getting back to a third of the meetings pretty fast.
So a Zoom meeting does not count as attendance.
No, it's attendance. It's just not in-person attendance.
From the standpoint of that number, though, it's counting as if you didn't attend at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is a little, for me personally, a line of like, that's saying someone's value at this table is not as much as someone else that's here. And I understand there's like you might gain more from being in person than you do, but we're saying that like that person's vote counts less because they're taking care of someone right now, or like that just doesn't feel like a very equitable thing to me. And so I think maybe, I guess I would want to vote on this, and then maybe we look at attendance as an edit, or in general, another conversation, but
I'm, can you please clarify, what do you mean by a vote that's virtual would count less?
if we're marking, like, you can miss this many meetings in general, but then you can miss, like, a Zoom meeting doesn't count towards being here is what I was.
No.
No, a Zoom meeting, I think I'm sorry, Nyla, you correct me if I'm wrong if I'm mischaracterizing, but I think what Nyla's saying is that her concern is just if you miss 25% of the meetings and then you do four Zooms, even non-consecutive, that it feels like you're missing a lot of, like, it, to her, the perception is that you're missing a lot more meetings, but your meetings while you're still on Zoom just count against your four that
Okay.
you could do for Zoom, but that doesn't make your vote count any less unless I'm
Yes, but
misinterpreting
I had
this.
heard
Yeah.
I heard you say that then there's language in the code that talks about you have to be here 2/3. I've heard people say you want to increase that amount, but what I heard Nyla say is if you are attending via Zoom for purposes of that ordinance, it counts as a miss.
Yeah, that's what I was responding
That's what I
to.
heard her say.
Oh,
Is
for
that what you said?
No, what I'm trying to say
me, that's not what she
is
meant,
if
but
we have it so that you can miss 25% of the meetings and not be there at all, you should not be able to add 4 Zoom meetings to that because that raises the total number of meetings. You don't need to be there in person.
So what you're saying is, okay, I want to clarify, I'm saying this out loud so I make sure I understand correctly. You're saying that if you have a regular absence, just you're not present in any format whatsoever, that should actually deduct one of the 4 virtual meetings that you could attend in the future? No, you're making a face, so I've got it
No.
wrong.
I'm saying you have a total of 6 meetings that you can miss. And that if you decide to come in virtually, but don't add 4 Zoom meetings on top of that 25%.
So if there are 12 meetings a year or 4 meetings a year, right? And you can miss one with the 25% rule. And
No.
you're here, this is how I'm understanding it. You're here 3 times and the 4th time you are on Zoom. So you're attending virtually and you're participating, let's say, but that counts as an absence.
No, it couldn't count as an absence if you're going to vote. I'm saying okay, go ahead.
Let me just try and sort of interpret what you're saying. What you're saying is that you want microphone. I'm sorry, I just turned it off. Okay. So what you're saying here, if I'm understanding correctly, is you want the 75% threshold to be in person only. You're not necessarily saying that it counts towards the absences, but you want basically what you're saying is you want 75% of the meetings to be attended in person. And basically, I'm trying to visualize this here. You're sort of almost lumping the Zoom and the absences together, not necessarily that they would count, but basically you want 75% of the meetings to be attended in person. So that way the number of in-person meetings that a member of this body or any other body attends does not drop from what it is now. Is that what you're saying?
I want it raised up from what it is now.
Right. So currently, right, it's 66%, it's 2/3. So your concern is that board members would be attending fewer meetings in person if this was implemented, even if the threshold was raised. Am I
Correct.
understanding that correctly? Okay.
So basically it's like you're losing a sick day. If you attend virtually, you're losing a sick day. Because you can miss 4 meetings. I attend one virtually. Now I can only miss 3 meetings. Right? I attend 2 virtually. I can only miss 2
If
meetings.
that's how you look at it, I suppose so.
I feel like this board is very responsible and committed to their roles and their duties. And I feel like we're almost putting punishments in place
Yeah.
before knowing if it's even going to be a problem, and I really don't think it will. And so that's right. I think, Aaron, you alluded to, but Joe said, you said it earlier too, is that if this ends up being a problem, we bring it back and we either take it away, remove it, or like, I kind of had the same opinion on the chickens the other day at the planning commission meeting. Like, I don't want to punish people before we find out if it's working or not working.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm thinking of somebody who's got got an illness or something and cannot attend in person, but can attend virtually, and then might also need a sick day down the road. And now because they've violated the policy, they're off the committee where their work could be really valuable. So I would agree to raising it to 25%, but I don't agree that you're forfeiting basically a sick day.
So here's
By attending
perhaps what I could suggest as a compromise between what we have going on here. So I've just been doing some basic math here, trying to, look at the numbers in the way that they would fall. How about as a draft, we raise it to 80%, but that includes the ability which you can attend on Zoom, because that would keep the percentage similar to what it is in person.
If we do 75%, that's divisible by, you can.
Well, that's true.
Pardon?
I'm just,
Yeah.
sorry.
So, I feel like 75% would be adequate.
Can we, I guess, vote on even raising it at all before we?
I would say we need to vote on virtual, or
whole-
we need to vote on the whole thing, the whole policy.
Okay.
Because if we raise it and we don't vote on it, then we've just really tied the hands on of people if we don't allow virtual.
Can I clarify? Raising that is not part of what we're looking at, if I recall
Yeah.
correctly,
Mhm.
right?
Is that a different statute?
It's in a separate place.
Todd has it up on his computer right now. It's section 2-329 of the ordinance. Talks about minimum of having to attend a minimum of 2/3 of the meetings in each 6-month period. And if you don't, then that's could potentially result in pursuing removal or replacement of the body. So you also have to understand that, our code, when it was adopted, and this is not a problem, but it never anticipated virtual attendance. And so it doesn't, you theoretically can approve this policy and not do any violation of the code, because what you're saying is attend means you're attending virtually. Now, if you want to change this percentage, first of all, you'd have to change the percentage by ordinance, and that's not before you tonight. Second of all, I hear you guys talking annually, whereas this is in a 6-month period. So that's a code provision change. But, and then I'm not even sure what language is in the handbook that Robert referenced at the previous meeting. We would have to, I do believe if you want to approve this policy tonight, you can. You also have the ability to say, I want it to come back, because I've heard at least, I think, 2 people say, I would be in favor of the policy if the percentage is changed. Now, I know that there's been a lot of discussion on that point, and so I'm not sure exactly where whenever is, but that's how we started on this. And so that's also a possibility and I would just say that to the extent that people are either in favor of the policy or want to see tweaks, I think I don't want to speak for Todd, but I think it would be beneficial, and you have to do this directly with him, to actually give him some written comments, because I'm trying to follow all the discussion, and to the extent that anybody wants to see any tweaks, it's kind of difficult to take as many notes as you can. But so can you adopt the policy tonight? Yes, you can. I've heard at least a couple people say, I may be in favor of the policy, but I want to see now the ordinance changed, in which case we would have to bring that back for you. And if we're going to bring the ordinance back, then in all likelihood, we're going to want to do a review of the handbook, just to make, and it may just to make sure clear there's no inconsistencies. And then the village attorney might want to add some clarifying language to that handbook that basically says this is guidance only and it has no impact from a legal perspective.
While we're into clarification, I'm interested in, do we need to pass both of those pieces together as one single unit, or would we need to deal with them separately specifically?
So the answer is all of the above. You could act tonight separately, or you can act on them together, and that's just really your determination.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question because I've heard you and I understand exactly what you're saying about family emergencies. And I am concerned because there isn't any specific language in this pertaining to an actual emergency where it's completely unplanned that you need to miss. But should there be a provision in there separate for that?
We've voted, when we have asked in advance for people to be excused, this board has voted against it. So absolutely, should people be, could we have a separate provision and keep this? I suppose. This is, I think, an incredibly flexible policy the way it is. I would agree with looking at the ordinance to change the percentage that you are allowed to miss. My concern is when I am talking to committee members who cannot be here for health reasons, but could call in and have important viewpoints, that we are silencing those voices. And that feels, I mean, you can say if you have to miss for work, it's one thing. If you've got to miss for another, that feels, that's hard to take because those voices need to be at the table. Yeah. And obviously you guys, I feel strongly about this, and I'm just repeating myself. I would like us to look at the separately so that we can maybe move forward on this. I can predict how this vote is going to go, but I think I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. I would like to move to approve the policy for remote participation by elected and appointed members of village boards, committees, and commissions. Wait, do I really want to do that? Let's bring it back next time and send Todd written
We
comments.
have to vote to table.
Can I pull back my motion as I'm saying it?
You didn't complete your motion.
I didn't complete my
Nobody
motion.
seconded you.
All right, cool.
In light of that, I would like to move to approve the policy for remote participation by elected and appointed members of village boards, committees, and commissions as it exists.
All right.
in
I'll
this
second
packet.
that.
Okay, any discussion on the
Quick
motion?
clarification, does that include the amendment which was brought up earlier, the sentence that was added to the end?
Well, I
that we were
think at this
discussing?
point, I think if someone's gonna make a motion to include that, I would make a motion, because I think part of that too is, do you want to, then you get into if you're gonna allow the committee member at the utility commission to call in, are they just gonna be able to call in? Is it gonna be the speakerphone? In other words, 2015, or is it going to be telephone conference 20, so that's why I wouldn't do that. I would leave the motion as it is because it's been seconded. And if somebody wants to make that amendment motion, do that, because I think they need to specify which direction they would want that telephone conference to be held.
Motion to amend the motion to be inclusive of the language that Administrator Schmidt brought up earlier in the conversation, which I don't have the exact of, but pertaining to the participation in committees that do not have full video teleconferencing abilities and need to use telephony.
And just to be clear, his language doesn't require a telephone conference. In other words, it would allow for the speaker, and you can do that if you want to.
Well, is a speaker not is a speaker not a telephone?
Well, but you wouldn't necessarily have, do you want members of the public to be able to call into, is the question.
That's why I said telephony.
Oh,
Phones.
okay. As opposed, so usually then you would set up a line, a call in, like, for example, on the agenda right now, I think that there's a call in, like, do you want a call in line so that members of the public could call in?
Yeah, because
Okay.
Zoom allows you to have a call-in line in there that if there's no video available. So you can set up a Zoom and still just have the call-in line and call into the call-in line and people can talk. Might require somebody to be on a laptop. This is not a part of my motion.
Yeah.
Might be required
No, no,
somebody to be on a laptop.
So you essentially what you want though, from a telephone standpoint, is similar to Zoom.
Yes.
Okay.
Can we're in the middle of motion. I want to challenge that a little bit.
I
Okay.
do too.
Well, I mean,
I haven't.
so Robert's made his motion. Now nobody can, I was just asking the clarification. I think I understand what you're saying with what you want.
Yes.
Before anybody can challenge anything, there's got to be a second to it.
Second.
Okay.
The more likely circumstance I would say is an unexpected last minute situation where the best thing the member can do to help the board achieve quorum is to get on a cell phone and up goes the speaker. And that could occur as little as an hour before the meeting, at which point we don't have the opportunity to set up a Zoom style phone system. Now, if we can do that, great, but I don't think that covers the potential circumstances that would be of concerning to other departments where it could result in the loss of quorum because of an emergency for a member.
That's why I was asking if we're requiring all of our boards and committees to meet in this room, because so many of them don't have that set up as the meeting is planned and noticed.
So with the telephony thing and if you can make emergency changes to an agenda, what's state law, like
2 hours.
2 hours prior. So if they have to reissue an agenda 2 hours prior because they know that somebody needs to call in and they have to add a Zoom phone number in there for somebody to call into, I think you're still covered by your situation, Todd. If they're calling in less than 2 hours, sorry, but we can't notice anymore at that point. So they're out of luck. I mean, I would hope somebody would know greater than 2 hours prior that they're not going to be there. And plus, since we just expanded the hasn't passed yet. If we're expanding the capability for call in, then you should know your quorum way in advance. So you shouldn't be scraping the barrel there to get that one last person there for quorum, I hope.
So let me put forward this sentence that you propose to add to clarify the point that I think I'm hearing. There may be circumstances where technical limitations or connectivity disruption create a situation where virtual participation via video is impossible. In such cases, the presiding official of said body shall be authorized to allow remote participation by phone or other similar means for all potential members or attendees.
Well, I would just say for committee members and the public.
Or other similar means for committee members and attendees is what
Gotcha.
how we use it in the definition.
That was what I was going for in my motion.
So that's clear for me in this.
Right, so now you have a motion, I mean, you still have further discussion, but you have a motion and a second on the amendment.
All right, any discussion on amendment first, then motion, correct?
Yeah, first on the.
All right, any discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next, let's call to question the motion. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
No.
All right, motion carries. We are going to want to revisit the ordinance on attendance percentage. Is that a consensus among the group?
Well, my question was, I was in the code. What's the citation to our municipal code?
You go ahead, you have it.
2-329.
329. Thank you.
And I found during our discussion, interestingly, the language that you saw in that committee handbook that's kind of obscure under a link somewhere on our website conflicts with language that's in our code. I don't have an explanation for that, but it's something that we need to clarify.
We will take a look at the handbook and the ordinance. And I think that we have direction from you all tonight at the meeting on at least to bring something back.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's an ordinance, you always have the ability to modify the language in the ordinance at your board meeting.
All right.
Can I ask just one last question? Because we discussed this with that nefarious handbook as well. When do we consider this a board? And the only reason I asked is because you have like the administrative review board. And so I wasn't sure, and I don't think we were clear last time when we talk about the board, is that inclusive of the village board, or are we talking about, because it's also with commissions, committees. And
Yeah, my understanding is the way that Todd has drafted this, it's the village board and then everything else is treated different. When you talked about that language regarding like 4 misses versus 3 misses, it's the village board, and then we do have other boards, but those boards would be grouped with committees and as opposed to the village board.
Okay. I only asked that because that section that you cited on there for attendance standard, I don't know if that applies to this board or if that only applies to.
We'd have to take a look because it's not,
Okay.
I think we're gonna take a look at the ordinance and the handbook in conjunction with the discussion that you've had tonight essentially bring forward language that we believe corresponds with your discussion. But again, then you're going to have the ability to modify that language. And I'm going to be blunt when it comes to the handbook. It's going to be, look, guidance is excellent, but it's going to be, hey, this is only guidance. We are not establishing law. We're not establishing a code within this handbook. It's simply here for informational purposes.
As you look at it, the only reason I'm making any issue about this whatsoever, I know this is really pedantic, but this is the only part of the code that doesn't have a reference to state law. So like the residency requirement doesn't refer back to state law, which would govern us. But that's why I'm saying, like, that's why I'm questioning whether or not the attendance standard that we have in here would apply to this board as opposed to everything else.
We'll look at it globally.
Okay, thank you.
All right, item number 4, discuss and take action on WPPA union contract. We're going to present this first, I believe, and then the village board might convene in closed session, but I will read that statement now.
Well, I mean, I guess
Okay.
so item 5, I think a fair amount of item 5. I don't know what would be discussed in closed session on item 4, maybe all of it. Item 5, I think a fair amount can be discussed in open session.
Okay.
And so that's where I'm not sure what you guys are doing with 4. My expectation is you're going into closed session almost entirely on 4, which means that you would probably want to skip ahead to 5 right now.
All right.
In
Let
light
it-
of that, I
Yeah.
would like to make a motion to flip flop 4 and 5.
All right.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Let's go to item number 5. Discuss and take action on public improvements associated with the intersection of State Highway 113 and Hogan Road and adjacent roadways, which may include an agreement with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and other public improvement agreements. Village board, and do I read the convene? Not yet. All right. Todd or Tim?
Oh, sure, be glad to. So as noted in the materials in the packet, this begins on page 160. Staff has been working with the DOT regarding possible intersection designs for the Hogan and State 113 intersection, the construction of which may take place in 2026. The DOT has generally signed off on those designs and are tentatively including that in the construction. However, the piece that's missing at this time is the who pays question. Included in the packet is a draft, and I underlined that 10 times, very draft. But it's a form of a document called a draft or a municipal finance agreement. We have one currently with DOT for some of the division and main improvements. The document that's in the packet would be very similar to that, modifying that to include the Hogan 19 intersection if the village so chooses. But to do that, they're asking us essentially to sign on the line, and Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and just say, if I'm saying this wrong, please jump in. If we sign, we're entering into a contract with the DOT. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're not necessarily asking you this evening, however, Todd, if we may be, a means of funding, there are several different means of funding the intersection improvements through various borrowing means. Backfilling that borrowing, one possible solution could be through a TID district, if the creation of a TID district, if those improvements were included in that. But anyway, so the document is really meant as a starting point to explore alternatives to whatever they may be in association with the funding of the Hogan and 19 intersection improvements. Hopefully I didn't confuse that too much. So Todd, if you want to jump in here, feel free.
So just to be, we are not talking about the creation of TID 10 tonight, and we are not talking about the project plan. However, Tim has already touched on this. We are talking about potential financing mechanisms, of which a TIF district is. So to the extent that we talk about different financing mechanisms, we can discuss the creation of TID. The other thing that we're talking about is, and this is, I'm just going to, some stuff can be open and some stuff can be closed depending on what you want to do. One thing that would potentially be closed would be, and it's not just the Highway 13 Hogan Road intersection, the agenda item does reference adjacent roadways. There are two potential public improvements that are related to that intersection. One would be the extension of Frank H. Street. The other would be the intersection of Frank H. and Hogan Road. There you have issues regarding financing mechanisms and arguably land that could or could not be, maybe included in TID 10, who knows, may benefit from that. So while we're not talking about the creation of TID 10 or the project plan, we can talk about TID in general from a financing standpoint and whether or not land that is adjacent to these improvements is benefited by the improvements. That's where, the idea of discussing public improvements in those areas, those three things, those are open session discussions. Timing of when to do it is an open session discussion. Financing mechanisms is an open session discussion. To the public improvement costs in general would be an open session discussion. To the extent that we want to get into, we think costs should be allocated in a certain way between property owners in the village, and how would we do an agreement? That's a closed session discussion. I just kind of wanted to lay that out on the front end, but I think that's where the idea is to start with an open session discussion, because so much of the information can be discussed without getting into potential terms and conditions and who do we think should have to pay for this if we're starting to talk about property owners.
All right, thank you.
If I can toss in my 2 cents to round out the staff discussion, and this is based on the layout for intersection improvements here and Frank H. extension, among other things, has been laid out by engineers prior to my time in Waunakee. This goes back 18 years in discussion, if not longer. I will tell you that I think there are only 2 reasons, if you believe either of them, only 2 reasons to not approve this agreement with the state. One is if you don't think this is an important improvement. You can think that. That's okay. I would disagree with you. And we could spend a lot of time talking about the condition of the intersection. I don't think we need to argue about that a whole lot, but there's room for it. 2 is if you think it's worth the gamble that we don't sign the agreement with the state with the thought or expectation or wish that the state's going to do it themselves. We just back out and we cross our fingers. The state's been really, really clear with us about this situation. We walk into this circumstance with an opportunity to dovetail state investment with local investment, which I think is a tremendous opportunity. In my opinion, those are the only 2 reasons that should exist for us to not execute this agreement with the state. I don't see any other reason why we shouldn't. So that's worth discussing. Whether the board disagrees with either 2 points, maybe you have other points. The notion of finding an opportunity to apply a participatory cost based on land area participation is a unique opportunity for us to perhaps offset impact that it would all otherwise be on the general levy, general borrowing. If we use TIF or not, I'm laying out there that I think there's an opportunity to proportionally have landowner participation through TIF support, but even without that, I think the 2 questions remain answered in my mind. This is an important intersection that needs support both for current safety conditions as well as future growth. And 2, the state's been very clear about the expectations and participation. So I guess, and those 2 questions I don't think are closed session sort of discussion points, are they, Brian?
I would say that to the extent that anyone believes that we need participation by other property owners, you can have a high level discussion on that, but to get into the details would be a closed session discussion. And I don't disagree with what Todd said at all. It's just, the way that I look at it globally is if you look at page 162 of your packet, and I think that, essentially, as I read this, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, if the village signs this agreement, it's on the hook for $1.7 million worth of costs. Now, that's going to be an estimate. I guarantee you there's language in this document that would allow those costs to go up if that's in fact what they were. There's also language that we're going to want to talk to assuming that the village board, whether it's tonight or some other night, goes forward with this agreement. There's language, some in the terms and conditions that we're going to want to talk to the DOT about, because I think it's a little inconsistent. But if the village board believes, you know what, we agree that the improvements need to be done. No, if we can get other participation, fantastic. But at the end of the day, we're willing to take the, and I use the risk term generally here. If you sign this agreement, you're effectively obligating yourself to pay the 1.7. Let's just call it 2, because it's going to be higher than that. That doesn't preclude you from getting participation from other entities, but it's the risk that you're not going to get participation and you're going to be on the hook. All that being said, I will tell you that I don't believe that we could reasonably get adjacent property owners to pay for all of these costs. It's ultimately going to be a percentage, because there's no question that even though adjacent properties may be benefited by this intersection, that the village as a whole also benefits. That's where a traffic impact analysis would be done. And so that, I think, kind of corresponds along with what Todd was saying, which is the village is going to have to pay some of this. It gets into the timing issue of it probably saves the village ultimately money if you get involved now, as opposed to passing on this now and then doing the improvements later after the state has done. And so I don't know what those numbers are, but again, that would support what Todd is saying. And then to me, it's just going to kind of come down to, and this might be, again, more of a closed session discussion, the risk analysis as it relates to other property owners.
All right, thank you. It's a big number. So let's ping pong, and it's an important intersection. Ping pong, start on the inside, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, I think working at an employer pretty much adjacent to this intersection has a lot of truck traffic. I think, it's important for improvements at that intersection, especially the offset turn lanes for trucks. Just sort of a curiosity question that somebody brought up. Would it be feasible, hypothetically, say, the traffic volume isn't there right away? Could we perhaps do everything, like we could, perhaps even buy the signals, but not necessarily install them until later? Or, add that later. I mean, at least the turn lane, piece, just somebody asked me that question. So
I do think in general, our discussions with the state, Tim, help me out here, is they see this and agree with the improvements. And even if the traffic warrants don't allow us to put signals in yet, they're intending to put in the stuff
Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking, the sub-ground stuff, but not necessarily the vertical components.
My sense is if we are on board with this agreement, they are willing to commit to those subsurface elements, even if the warrants don't let us put in the signals.
Okay.
In 2026.
Thank you.
All right, Aaron.
Great. That's accurate. Yep.
I think it says we have to pay for that though. I don't know. I do like that the traffic counts aren't for another 2 years, because I think that will help kind of see how things play out. But I was just reading on the basis for local participation, and anyways, but so I'm glad about that. So we know we kind of can see growth over a few years or traffic as things change over there. Just make sure that it's most up to date. But yeah, it's definitely in need of updates. I've had people in my life get in really bad accidents over there, and I think that some attention to it is important. It's a lot of money, and it's good that we can team up, I guess, early on than getting later having to backtrack. But.
All right, Trisha.
Yeah, I don't know how feasible it would be for our business park to keep expanding without doing something to that intersection. I think that's a pretty critical improvement that'll need to get made, to the point that the people are making it is a lot of money. So to have the state support to make it happen, I think is an opportunity that we should take pretty seriously.
Joe.
It's undoubtedly an important intersection that we need to handle. As far as paying for it, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around exactly what some sort of TIF might look like for that. My interest in that would be to the best potential possibility, limiting the use to specifically this and allocate, but yeah, I don't know that we're quite there. But yeah, we need to move forward with it.
And to be clear, TIF isn't the only, I mean, theoretically, a special assessment district could be established. If you do a traffic impact analysis, and I'm speaking generally right now because I'm not aware of what the actual numbers are, but you know, just from viewing it, you know, theoretically, you could have a traffic impact analysis that would say, look, the village as a whole is benefiting 20%. And then each of the properties in each of the 4 quadrants is benefiting 20%. And then you figure out a way to essentially try to recover the money from the 20% that is in the village right now. And then there's always a risk that you're not going to recover this, but you always have the ability to recover costs that you've incurred that benefit properties that annex. And so 3 of the properties in 3 of the quadrants. Now, sometimes those numbers can become so high that you have a negotiation because the property owner essentially says, I can pay you X, but I can't pay you the full amount. And then but I'm getting way on over my skis, but I just want to say there's other mechanism than TID to help pay for these improvements. And that's part of the agenda item is broad enough to allow us to have a discussion about those different financing opportunities.
To also include potential state and federal grants as those evolve over the next couple of years.
Sure.
Nyla. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe, were you done? I'm sorry. Nyla.
Safety is something I am all about, so I see what we need to do something for safety concerns at the intersection. But I'm very, very happy that we're considering different financing mechanisms rather than just TID or TIF. So I feel that the intersection needs to be done, but I would like to really evaluate financing.
Thank you, Nyla. Robert.
Stole my thunder. I wanted to talk about special assessment and
Well, I'm going to steal your thunder back though after you're done because it's very dangerous. Dangerous is the wrong word. It's litigious.
yes. Well, I was gonna say that would be a risk. Sorry, Deborah, I'm not staring at my phone just so the public's aware my laptop is dead, so I've reverted my backup here. So the concerns that I have, we should be able to look at alternative financing, not just special assessment, but I mean, just straight out borrowing. I feel like we have significant space on our debt service that we could be looking at. This isn't supposed to be, we wouldn't pay for this, I assume, until work principally begins in 2026, or would we be looking at doing work prior to that?
Well, how is the payment process for these agreements with the state?
Good question. I'm not.
Bill here? With the division, for example, when we signed our agreement with them to participate, if I recall correctly, our financial involvement came much later.
Correct.
After the project is complete.
Okay, so we don't need to commit ourselves to a high interest rate environment now. My concern, and I am going to talk about the TID for a second here, is that if we rush to create the district now and we start issuing, MR municipal revenue bonds, if I get that right, obligations, excuse me. Now in a high rate environment, it sounds like it might cost us more in the long run to do that, whereas opposed to if we look to finance this ourselves without going into that, or looking at a
Financing obligation, yep.
Yeah, or looking at some sort of litigious special assessment, that we would be kind of hamstringing ourselves a little bit and committing to something that maybe isn't favorable to taxpayers. The other part I will reiterate, thank you. As a regular user of that intersection, I agree. It's a disgusting intersection. I'm fortunate to have a car with way too much horsepower so I can fly out of there. But I know that if I was driving my old Civic, I probably would have gotten hit a few times. So it's definitely something that we need to look at. The other part of it that I was just going to ask, then I'm apologies for not asking this way earlier in the process to you, Tim, but is there a reason why, I know the state loves roundabouts. Is there a reason why signalized intersection versus a roundabout in this part? Is it just because of the trucks?
No, actually, a TIA was done within the last year or so by a private consultant, and that the two options were explored. And the DOT signed off, I think, and I'm at the risk of speaking for them, I think they generally favor roundabouts from a safety standpoint, but in this case, it would have consumed a lot more land and been a lot orders of magnitude, like at least twice as expensive. So they signed off on the controlled intersection version because it met essentially safety threshold plus the cost.
Okay, that's fine. I'm not advocating for, I personally hate roundabouts, but I just was curious. Okay, then that's really it. I would just stress on the financing that if we do continue down the discussion about creating a TID district, if we do have to issue bonds in a higher interest rate market environment versus taking, a risk, so to speak, and waiting it a little bit, still financing it, moving forward, we need to do it. We need to do it, absolutely. But financing it ourselves through a different way, I still think that that's a more viable option for this, because if I remember correctly, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it because it's specific to that TID, but I feel like this was one of the largest costs of the district that would be created. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, from a financing perspective, keep in mind though, the MROs that we issue are negotiated. We have many MROs that we have issued that have no interest associated with them. So, I mean, that's a negotiating point.
I'm pushing back on it a little bit because I thought this one specifically they were talking about.
Well,
It
okay,
was
so
different than our normal ones.
well, yes, although I would do the same thing if I were in their shoes, but they were trying to negotiate with you all when they were making their presentations. We don't have to pay any attention to what they were saying, from my perspective.
Then I'm glad we had that in open session because I want to make sure everybody understands that
Yeah.
that's not what it may end up being if
Correct.
it exists. Okay.
All right, I am in full agreement. We need to take care of this. It's incredibly hazardous. I hold my breath every time I see a teenager drive through there, especially thinking it's young drivers, good drivers, but inexperienced, and hoping nothing happens. You do not have an action listed for us at this time. So what would our next steps be?
Well, I would say this, I mean, if you're inclined to, while there's not a recommended motion, the agenda item is broad enough that allows you to act on this agreement tonight if you want. It also allows you to say, we want more information. While we generally agree that we need to go ahead with these improvements, we want more information, so bring it back. If you are inclined to approve the agreement tonight, I would suggest that it be done subject to final review and approval by staff, because there's still some things that we need to work out regarding some of the language. And I'm not sure, I guess even before I say this, do you guys, I mean, if the board is inclined to approve the agreement, are you okay with that? Are the two of you okay with that?
With the subject language.
Yeah.
That you brought, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I should have checked with you guys. So yeah, if you're inclined to approve it, we're still going to want to tweak it a little bit. And as Tim and Todd indicated in the staff memo, keep in mind that this is probably a prior draft. That number is going to go up. And so if you want staff to talk to with DOT and effectively get, if they have updated numbers, and have that come back to you before you act, that can be done too. All that being said, the discussion that you've had tonight, as particularly as it's related to the safety issue, would support approving it. The only risk that I'm saying, I mean, the risk that you're taking is that we don't work out, if you do approve it, essentially we're on the hook for all of the improvements. Doesn't mean we don't have multiple financing mechanisms that can't take care of it. Doesn't mean we can't negotiate deals in the future on it. It's just that's the risk associated with it, is we ultimately don't get those deals done and the village pays for all of it. But that, again, I've heard plenty of people talk about safety risk at this intersection.
Just for clarification, when you say all of it, I want the public.
1.74, yeah.
And that's a component of a vastly larger scope of infrastructure required for signalization.
Yes, there's more money to,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Nyla, you looked like you were going to say something.
I think I'd like to wait and get the most detailed information that we can get.
And Tim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, a couple of things. Let me address Nyla's question or concern first. I don't know, I mean, since the project is still 2 years off, I don't know, like every day you wait is going to be a new number. So at some point, you know what I'm saying? You're going to have to either pull the trigger or not. the way this agreement is written, it's based on percentages and so forth. So it's not necessarily, even if they give us that updated number, it's not going to be what it is. And that which leads me now to page 164, and this someone, and I can't know if it was Robert or so, I'm sorry, who asked the question about the billing. And point number 4 at the top of page 164, as the work progresses, the municipality will be billed for work completed, which is not chargeable to federal or state funds. Upon completion of the project, a final audit will be made to determine the final division of costs. So we can ask them and they'll give us the most current, but recognize that that still is likely not to be what the final numbers are going to be, because it's still 2 years out. If you follow what I'm saying.
Okay, so then if they're giving us a number and prices go down, is it possible that the numbers would go down?
I think so.
Because, because being on Public Works, I've seen where they've had estimates and then the bids come in lower than we anticipated, which is great, but we can't count on that.
Right.
All right. Any other questions?
I just have a very broad question that feels like a no-brainer to me, but I don't know. Like if we want something in this intersection, it would then be on us for further, like we want a bike lane, like within there, ever. Like that's cost is entirely on us.
You're talking about an enhancement above the
Yes.
design that you see on page 165.
Yes, or the general design that happens, I guess. Or is that still factored in the percentage?
My sense is, if you don't mind, my sense is, after working with the DOT for the several months that we have, if we wanted to get changes to this design, it probably wouldn't make the 26 construction.
plan.
We're too far,
Yeah, so then later improvements will be back on us.
Yes,
most
and
likely.
then, but those, because it's a state highway, would have to be approved by
Approved
state
by
DOT.
them. I was
Yeah.
just daydreaming.
We have seen some plans, you might not have been here for the meetings, but related to bike lanes, there are internal networks within the business park expansion on Frank H that includes bike lane east-west. But, north-south might be the challenge.
I would like to make a motion to approve the agreement subject to approval by staff and village attorney, or not you, just staff?
You say village administrator and village attorney.
Village administrator and village attorney.
Second, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, back to item number 4. Discuss and take action on WPPA union contract.
I think, Chief, are you willing to provide a intro to the item, or do you have any item? Maybe talk about the process to date?
Sure.
Okay.
So it's a contract year. Our contract was expiring. So Jared, Todd was involved in some of the meetings. Our village labor attorney, Steve Zock, as we do every year, sit down to begin the negotiation process. A lot of work goes into that. It's essentially a staffing study, or not a staffing study, excuse me, a salary study to make sure that our numbers are competitive along the way, as well as other language terms, language items that might be in the contract that the union or the village would like to have changed. There was a number of meetings that happened to get to the point that where we are right now. So we are bringing an agreement to you guys that our team feels is very strong, and the union has voted on, and they're in support of it.
Right, thank you. All right, and any more? No? All right, then it is my turn to read the statement. The village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin State Statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So with that, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor? Wait, no, I'm sorry, roll call vote.
And
Thank you.
before your roll call, I'll note, I would expect a return to open session for action on this. We already have a TA signature from the union. So assuming all goes well in our closed session discussion, we'll announce ratified contract when we come back to open.
All right, roll call vote.
Nyla Frye. Here. Trisha Brown.
Yay.
Yes.
Who was gonna?
Karen Moran.
Yes.
Joe Zitzelsberger.
Yes.
And Robert McPherson.
Yes.
And for purposes of the recording, we'll be no longer recording the meeting. So the official minutes of our meeting will reflect the action in open session. It won't be on the recording.
We don't
have to use these now then?
Correct.